Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was chosen by the Anti-Monitor to collapse the multiverse. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was screaming. It wasn't a sound one could hear with their ears, but a vibration felt deep in the bones, in the soul. It was the scream of concrete being pulverized into dust, of steel groaning as it was twisted into unrecognizable sculpture, of a city giving up its ghost under the relentless assault of one man. The air, thick with grit and the metallic tang of blood, tasted of endings. Izuku Midoriya, known to the world as Deku, tasted it with every ragged breath he drew. His body was a tapestry of agony. His left arm, a latticework of shattered bones held together by sheer will and the crackling green energy of One for All, hung uselessly at his side. His right leg buckled with every shift in weight, the fibula a splintered mess. Blood, warm and sticky, tracked a path from a gash on his forehead down his cheek, mingling with the sweat and tears that blurred his vision. Across the cratered expanse that had once been Jaka's city's central plaza, his nemesis stood. Tamura Shigaraki was no longer just a man. He was a monument to decay, an avatar of annihilation given form. His body, a grotesque fusion of All for One's will and his own horrifying quirk, radiated an aura of pure malevolence. Tendrils of dark energy writhed from his back, and the ground around his feet was a dead, gray wasteland. Every speck of life decayed into nothingness. "Is that all, hero?" Shigaraki's voice was a rasp, a sound like grinding tombstones. He took a step, and a building a block away crumbled into dust as if its very concept had been erased. "I thought the ninth wielder of One for All would be more entertaining." All Might left his legacy to a crying, broken child. Deku pushed himself up, his functional leg trembling under the strain. He could feel the vestiges of One for All churning within him, a maelstrom of desperation and power. They were screaming, too. "He's too strong, ninth!" The voice of Daigoro Banjo, the fifth user, was strained. "He's adapting faster than we can hit him. His regeneration, it's monstrous," Nana Shimura, the seventh, added, her voice laced with a pained echo of her own final battle. "Every blow you land, he rebuilds himself stronger." "Then we only need to land one more," Deku thought, his resolve hardening into a diamond point of focus. He ignored the screaming nerves, the exhaustion that felt like lead in his veins. He looked past Shigaraki, at the periphery of the battlefield. He could see the still forms of his friends and teachers. Endeavor, encased in his own ice to quell the catastrophic burns from Shigaraki's assault. Bakugo, unconscious, his gauntlets shattered. Shoto, slumped against a pillar of his own making, breathing but unmoving. They had thrown everything they had at him. And it wasn't enough. It was up to him. It was always up to him. "I'm not broken," Deku grunted, forcing himself to stand straighter. The green lightning of One for All flared around him, more erratically now, like a dying star fighting against the inevitable collapse. "As long as one person needs saving, I will never be broken." Shigaraki laughed, a dry, joyless sound. "A lovely sentiment. Write it on my tombstone." He raised a hand, fingers splayed. The air itself began to decay around his palm. "But there will be no one left to save, no one left to remember you. This whole rotten society, with its false hopes and its worthless heroes, it all ends today." Deku closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. He reached deep, deeper than he ever had before, past the pain, past the fear. He reached into the core of One for All, that brilliant, sun-like nexus where the wills and powers of 8 generations converged. "All Might, everyone, lend me your strength. Not just your power. Everything." He felt them respond. Not just as voices, but as a surge of pure energy. Yoichi, the first, a gentle, determined warmth. The second and third, a grim, silent resolve. Haikyuu Shinomori, a cool, analytical focus. Daigoro Banjo, a kinetic, explosive burst. En, a smoky, coiled power. And Nana Shimura, a fierce, protective love that felt like a shield around his heart. And then All Might. The vestige of his mentor wasn't just a part of the storm, he was the guiding light within it. The memory of his booming laughter, his unwavering smile, his absolute belief in him. Go beyond, my boy. Plus ultra. The green energy around Deku intensified, its light so brilliant it bleached the color from the ruined cityscape. The ground beneath his feet cracked, pebbles and dust levitating around him. He could feel his own body starting to protest, the cells themselves screaming at the impossible strain. This wasn't 100%. This wasn't even the desperate, body-breaking 120% he had tapped into before. This was everything. This was an absolute, one for all. He whispered, the name a prayer and a promise. The energy coalesced around his right arm, the one that wasn't completely shattered. The flesh sizzled, the bones groaned, but the power held them together, wrapping them in a verdant, cosmic fire. Shigaraki's smirk faltered, a flicker of genuine alarm crossing his features. He could feel the shift in the air, the pressure of reality itself bending around the boy. What are you, 1,000,000%? The roar was not just from his throat. It was from the soul of One for All, from 8 heroes long dead and one still fighting. It was the collective cry of a legacy aimed like a spear at the heart of despair. Delaware. He drew his arm back, the motion impossibly slow and yet infinitely fast. Time itself seemed to warp around the fist, which no longer looked like flesh and bone but like a contained nebula of pure, heroic will. Detroit. He saw it all in that single, eternal moment. His mother's tearful smile. All Might giving him the strand of hair. Uraraka's floating, determined face during the sports festival. Ida's hand on his shoulder. Bakugo's back as they fought side by side. Every life he had touched, every person who had believed in him. This was for them. All of them. Smash! He lunged forward. The resulting impact wasn't an explosion. An explosion is a release of energy into space. This was a deletion of space itself. Shigaraki's eyes widened in horror as the fist connected with his chest. For a split second, there was no sound, no light, only an absolute, crushing pressure. Then reality broke. It wasn't a tear. It was a shatter. Like a pane of glass struck by a diamond, the very fabric of the world in front of Deku's fist fractured. A web of black, geometric lines spread outwards, and through them, there was nothing. Not darkness, which is the absence of light, but a true, conceptual void, the absence of existence. A pinprick hole was punched through the world. The shockwave that followed was secondary, an afterthought of the universe trying to correct its own violation. It wasn't wind, it was space-time itself rushing to fill the vacuum. Shigaraki was not thrown back, he was unmade. The top half of his body simply ceased to be, erased by a power that wasn't meant for this dimension. The backlash hit Deku like a physical blow. The energy receded, leaving him empty, hollowed out. The strength vanished, and the pain returned, 1,000 times worse than before. He collapsed onto his knees, his vision swimming. The hole in reality, no bigger than a fist, shimmered for a moment, a black wound in the sky, and through that wound, something looked back. It was a gaze without eyes, a perception without form. It felt ancient, cold, and impossibly vast. Deku felt a sudden, primal dread that dwarfed anything Shigaraki had ever made him feel. It was the feeling of a microbe being noticed by the scientist whose petri dish it inhabited. He was small. He was insignificant. And he had just made a very, very loud noise. The world around him dissolved. One moment, he was on his knees in the rubble of Jakku, the smell of ozone in his nostrils. The next, he was nowhere. The concept of place was gone. There was no up or down, no forward or back. There was no light, no sound, no temperature. There was only a crushing, silent, absolute blackness that was not an absence of light, but a presence of nothing. His body was gone, yet his consciousness remained, a single, terrified spark floating in an infinite, indifferent ocean of non-being. Where am I? What is this? He screamed in his mind, but the thoughts had no sound, no echo. They were simply swallowed by the silence. The vestiges were there, but they were faint, like distant stars shrouded in fog. Their collective strength felt muted, their voices reduced to fearful whispers in the back of his awareness. They were huddling around his core consciousness, a protective barrier against the sheer wrongness of this place. Then, the nothingness began to congeal. It coalesced, gathering itself into a form that defied geometry and reason. It rose before him, a shape that his human mind could only interpret as a figure, though it was more a piece of the void given purpose. A colossus of impossible scale, forged from the anti-space he floated in, armored in plates of cobalt and silver that seemed to absorb the very concept of light. Its face was a mask of cosmic indifference, smooth and featureless save for two burning points of light that were not eyes, but holes into a universe of pure, destructive energy. They looked like dying stars, radiating cold instead of heat. Deku's consciousness reeled. This being was to Shigaraki what a hurricane is to a slight breeze. This was not a villain. This was a fundamental law of physics, a principle of the universe given a malevolent will. A voice entered his mind. It did not speak in words but in concepts, in pure, unshielded meaning that hammered directly against his soul. "It is rare," the voice resonated, feeling like the grinding of galaxies, for a creature of positive matter to generate energy sufficient to breach the source wall. Especially one of such primitive origin. Deku's terror was so absolute it cycled back around to a strange, numb confusion. Source wall? Positive matter? Who? What are you? The colossal being seemed to shift its focus, its dead star eyes boring into the very essence of him. Deku felt himself being analyzed, his history, his biology, his quirk, all laid bare and catalogued in an instant. I am the counterweight, the equal and opposite. Where there is creation, I am the inevitable correction. I am the anti-monitor. And I have observed your universe's flaw. Flaw? Life. Hope. Struggle. All of it disorder. A cosmic aberration. A cancerous spread of positive matter that complicates the beautiful, simple purity of the void. All things must be reduced to their one true state. Antimatter. Silence. Order. The sheer nihilism of the statement was a physical blow. Everything Deku was, everything he fought for, hope, saving people, the defiant spark of life, this creature called it a mistake. You're insane, Deku projected back, his own heroic will, honed by a lifetime of struggle, finally finding its footing even in this impossible place. Life isn't a flaw. It's what matters. Helping people, protecting them, that's the only purpose that means anything. For the first time, a feeling emanated from the anti-monitor. It was not emotion as a human would understand it, but a dry, cold flicker of what might be called interest. Purpose. Indeed. The entity's gaze intensified, focusing not just on Deku, but on the nexus of power within him. This one for all. A remarkable anomaly. It stockpiles not just energy, but will, the drive of its hosts. It is a self-perpetuating engine of heroic intent. An anchor of hope for your entire reality. Deku felt a surge of pride even here. It's the power that's going to stop you, if you try to hurt my world. The anti-monitor made a sound that might have been a chuckle, a low rumble that vibrated through the void. Stop me? Child, you misunderstand. You are not here to be my enemy. The two burning stars that were its eyes seemed to flare. That very engine of hope, your indomitable will to sacrifice yourself for others, the very essence of your heroism. That is precisely what I require. You are the most perfect key I have ever encountered. The meaning slammed into Deku with the force of a physical blow. Key? The multiverse is a clutter of flawed, positive matter realities, each sealed from the other, the anti-monitor explained, its tone that of a lecturer explaining an immutable fact. To collapse them, to return them to the purity of the antimatter universe, requires a catalyst. A conduit. A being with the power to touch the barriers between worlds and the will to generate the emotional and energetic friction to unravel them. A hero forced to destroy. A savior forced to annihilate. Deku's consciousness recoiled in pure, undiluted horror. The implication was monstrous, unthinkable. No, he whispered, the soundless word a desperate plea. No. I would never. I'm a hero. I save people. That's who I am. Exactly, the anti-monitor stated, its voice devoid of malice, filled only with chilling certainty. Your resistance is not an obstacle. It is the mechanism. Every universe you are forced to erase, your heart will break. Your spirit will scream. That agony, that conflict between your nature and your function, will generate the very anti-energy I need to power the collapse of the next. Your struggle will be the fuel for my great work. You will not be my servant, Izuku Midoriya. You will be my engine. No! Deku's will flared, a tiny green nova in the overwhelming black. I refuse. I'll die first. I'll fight you. He tried to summon One for All, to lash out, to do something. But here, in this conceptual realm, his power was a candle in a hurricane. The vestiges shrieked in his mind as the Anti-Monitor's presence bore down on them. Fighting is irrelevant. Death is a mercy you have not earned, the entity stated, its cold logic unassailable. Your refusal is noted. And it is accepted. As the first payment of energy. Now, become what you were chosen to be. A tendril of pure void, blacker than the space around it, shot forth from the Anti-Monitor's chest. It was not fast. It was simply there, piercing the protective shell of the vestiges and plunging into the core of Deku's consciousness, into the sun of One for All. The pain was beyond description. It was not physical. It was a violation of his very being. It felt like ice and fire, like life and its absolute negation, being forced together. He felt the cold, nihilistic energy of the Anti-Monitor latch onto the warm, golden core of his quirk. It wasn't trying to destroy One for All. It was trying to co-opt it. To poison the well. To turn the power of heroes into a weapon of cosmic genocide. The voices of the vestiges became screams of pure agony. He could feel their memories, their wills, being tainted, twisted. Nana Shimura's love curdled into despair. Daigoro Banjo's kinetic energy became chaotic and destructive. Yoichi's gentle warmth was being smothered by an encroaching, absolute cold. Deku's own consciousness screamed until it had no voice left. He was being remade, reforged against his will. His identity as a hero was being overwritten with a new, horrifying purpose, catalyst. Herald, destroyer. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. He was violently, brutally thrown back into his body. The transition was a physical slam. The silence of the void was replaced by a deafening roar as his senses came back online. The feeling of non-existence was replaced by the symphony of agony from his shattered body. He was on the ground, gasping, the taste of blood and dust sharp on his tongue. The sky above was a dirty gray, filled with smoke. He was back. But something was wrong. He pushed himself onto his elbows, his vision clearing. He looked at his hands. The familiar, comforting green lightning of One for All was flickering around them, but it was sick. Veins of terrifying, void-like black and hateful purple crackled alongside the green, like a disease, like cracks in a beautiful emerald. The black energy seemed to devour the light around it, while the purple pulsed with a malevolent, alien thrum. The power felt cold. It felt empty, and beneath it all, he could feel a constant, silent whisper in the back of his mind, the Anti-Monitor's will, a hook buried deep in his soul. DKU. The voice was rough, panicked. Bakugo. Young Midoriya. That was All Might, his voice strained with worry. He heard the crunch of rubble as his friends and mentors rushed to his side. He tried to push himself up, to tell them what happened, to warn them. But his throat was raw, and his mind was a maelstrom of cosmic horror and dawning, soul-crushing despair. All Might, in his skeletal form, skidded to a halt beside him, his blue eyes wide with a mixture of relief and dawning confusion. My boy, are you all right? What was that power? Shigaraki is... He trailed off, his gaze falling upon the energy still coursing over Deku's frame. Bakugo was next, stumbling but upright, his face pale beneath the grime. What the hell is that freaky light show, nerd? You beat him, but what the hell is that? Uraraka, Ida, and the others were approaching, their faces a mixture of awe at his victory and growing apprehension. Deku opened his mouth to speak, but all that came out was a choked sob. He looked from All Might's horrified face to Bakugo's confused glare, and then back down at his own hands, at the corrupted, poison light show that was once his source of hope. He was no longer just Deku, the hero. He was a key. A weapon. He was the carrier of a cosmic plague. He wasn't just a danger to his enemies anymore. He was a danger to everything. The horrifying realization, the physical and psychic trauma, the sheer weight of the Anti-Monitor's touch, it was too much. The world swam, the edges of his vision darkening. The corrupted lightning sputtered and died. The last thing he saw before the blackness took him completely was the look of absolute terror dawning on All Might's face as he stared at the unnatural energy emanating from his successor. He had won the battle. But in doing so, he had drawn the attention of the thing that would make him lose the war for all of existence. He had saved his city, but he had just been handed the power to doom the multiverse. He didn't want it. He didn't want any of it, but the choice, he was beginning to understand with a cold, sinking dread, was no longer his to make. Izuku Midoriya awoke to the color white. It was a sterile, unforgiving white. The white of pristine ceiling tiles, of starched bedsheets, of a world bleached of the grit and horror he had just left behind. A steady, rhythmic beeping to his left was the only sound, a metronome marking time in a place that felt out of sync with his own racing heart. He knew this place. The faint, antiseptic smell of cleaning agents and medicinal herbs was unmistakable. Yue Hai's infirmary. He blinked, his thoughts swimming in a thick, syrupy fog. The last thing he remembered was the ground rushing up to meet him, the look of terror on All Might's face, and a cold, vast presence burrowing into the core of his soul. A groan escaped his lips as he tried to sit up. Pain, sharp and immediate, flared through his entire body. It wasn't just the familiar, agonizing burn of overusing one for all. This was different. A deeper, colder ache that seemed to emanate from his very marrow. Easy now, dearie. You've been through the ringer. The voice was kind, familiar. Chio Shizenji, recovery girl, bustled over to his bedside. Her usual warm smile was strained, her brow furrowed with a concern that went beyond simple patient care. You took out Shigaraki. You saved us all. But the cost. Midoriya, the energy readings we got from you were impossible. The anti-monitor, Deku rasped, his throat feeling like it was lined with sandpaper. The name felt alien and profane on his tongue. Recovery girl's expression softened with pity. You were delirious when they brought you in. Just rest. Your body is a mess. Broken bones in all 4 limbs, severe internal bruising, quirk exhaustion on a level I've never recorded. She leaned in, her lips puckering for her signature healing kiss. Let's get you patched up. Deku's eyes widened in panic. No, wait, but it was too late. Her lips pressed against his forehead. The effect was instantaneous and horrific. Instead of the usual warm, soothing wave of accelerated healing, it felt as though a lightning bolt of pure agony had been shot directly into his brain. A blood-curdling scream tore itself from his throat, raw and animalistic. The green energy of One for All, which had been dormant, erupted around him in a violent, uncontrolled torrent. But it was the wrong color. The vibrant, heroic green was still there, but it was sick, choked by writhing tendrils of abyssal black that seemed to drink the light from the room and streaked with veins of violent, glitching purple. The sterile white walls of the infirmary were momentarily cast in a grotesque, nauseating light show. The heart monitor beside him screamed a flatline tone as the electronics were fried, and the 4 stand near his bed buckled and warped as if the space it occupied was being twisted. Recovery girl scrambled back, her face a mask of shock and horror. What in heaven's name? Her quirk had never, ever had a reaction like this. It hadn't healed him. It felt like it had tried to pour life energy into a black hole, and the resulting reaction was one of violent, fundamental rejection. The door to the infirmary slammed open. All Might, in his skeletal form, and a grim-faced Shota Aizawa rushed in, drawn by the scream. They froze at the sight before them. Deku, thrashing in his bed, wrapped in a cocoon of energy that looked like a perversion of everything One for All was supposed to stand for. Young Midoriya! All Might cried out, taking a step forward. He could feel it, even from the doorway. The last dying ember of One for All within him, usually a source of faint warmth and pride, now felt like a shard of ice in his chest. It recoiled from the energy radiating from his successor. It recognized the power, but it was tainted, corrupted, wrong. Aizawa was more pragmatic. His eyes flashed red, his long black hair levitating as he activated his erasure quirk. The effect was immediate. The unholy light show around Deku vanished. The crushing pressure in the room dissipated. Deku fell back against the pillows, gasping, his body trembling uncontrollably. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his eyes wide with a terror that went far beyond the physical pain. It hurts, Deku whimpered, looking at his hands as if they were venomous snakes. Your quirk, it felt like it was trying to burn me from the inside out. Aizawa kept his gaze locked on the boy, his expression hard and unreadable. What happened to you on that battlefield, Midoriya? After the main blow. We all saw the light, but this is something else. I don't know how to explain it, Deku stammered, his mind a chaotic mess of shattered reality and cosmic whispers. He could still feel it, a cold, silent presence latched onto his soul. It wasn't speaking now. It was just watching. Waiting. A constant, low hum of nihilism at the edge of his thoughts. Patience. The vessel must understand its new nature. The thought was not his own. It was cold, clinical, and it made the hairs on his arms stand on end. He flinched, looking around the room as if expecting to see the towering form of the anti-monitor standing in the corner. All Might moved to his bedside, his face etched with a deep, paternal fear. Son, talk to us? We can't help you if we don't know what we're fighting. It's not something we can fight, Deku said, his voice cracking. He began to explain, the words tumbling out in a frantic, desperate rush. He spoke of the 1,000,000% smash, of the hole it tore in the world, of the vast, cold mindscape. He described the colossal being made of void, the dead star eyes, the voice that spoke in pure concepts. He talked about the anti-monitor, the multiverse, the positive and antimatter universes. He explained its horrifying purpose and the role he had been chosen for. He spoke of being a key, a catalyst, an engine of despair. The more he spoke, the more the looks on his mentors' faces shifted from concern to a deep, profound confusion and worry of a different kind. To them, it sounded like the ravings of a mind shattered by trauma, a waking nightmare brought on by pushing his quirk and his body past every conceivable limit. Aizawa exchanged a glance with All Might. It was a look that clearly said he's in shock. This is a psychological break, Midoriya, Aizawa said, his voice softened slightly, a rare occurrence. You took a blow that would have killed anyone else. You defeated an enemy we thought was unbeatable. It's understandable that your mind is trying to process the trauma. We'll give you the best counselors, the best therapists. No! You don't understand. It's real. Deku's voice rose with desperation. I can feel it, right now, inside me. It poisoned one for all. He held up a trembling hand. Please, you have to believe me. All Might placed a gentle, bony hand on his shoulder. We believe that you are suffering, my boy. That's what matters. We'll get through this. Together. The condescension, however well-intentioned, was a knife in Deku's heart. They didn't believe him. They thought he was crazy. He was utterly, completely alone with this cosmic horror. The feeling of isolation was a chasm opening beneath him. His desperation and frustration began to build, a pressure cooker of fear and helplessness. I can prove it, he whispered, a dangerous idea forming in his mind. I can show you. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Show us what? The power, Deku said, his gaze distant. It's not just one for all anymore. It's something else. An hour later they were in Gamma Gym, the vast training facility, usually a place of controlled chaos and heroic exuberance, was deathly silent. It was just Deku, All Might, Aizawa, and a floating monitor displaying the impassive, intelligent face of Principal Niza. Recovery Girl had been ordered to stay behind. No more healing attempts. Deku stood in the center of the cavernous room, dressed in a loose-fitting gym uniform. He felt fragile, like a piece of glass about to shatter. The walk here had been agonizing, every step a reminder of the alien coldness coiling within him. He could feel the stares of his teachers, feel their fear and their pity. It made him feel like a specimen under a microscope. So, Midoriya, Niza's voice chirped from the monitor, though it lacked its usual cheerful spark. You claim your quirk has been altered. Aizawa-kun has informed me of your theory. For the safety of everyone at this school, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Can you demonstrate this new aspect of your power in a controlled manner? Deku nodded, his throat dry. Controlled. The word was a mockery. He had no idea how to control this. He just knew it was there. He looked at his hand, then at a reinforced concrete pillar 50 meters away, one specifically designed to withstand All Might's punches at 30% power. He tried to summon the familiar feeling of One for All, the warmth, the crackle of energy flowing from his core down his arm. He found it, but the cold presence was latched onto it, inseparable. It felt like trying to pick up a treasured photograph that had been glued to a block of dry ice. He focused, channeling a minuscule amount of power, the kind he would use for a simple air flick. Just 1%. He flicked his finger. What happened next was silent, and far more terrifying than any explosion. There was no rush of wind. No smash sound effect that echoed through the gym. For a split second, a tiny sphere, no bigger than a marble, of the most perfect, absolute blackness imaginable, materialized at the tip of his finger. It wasn't dark. It was a whole in color, light, and space. It made a sound like a gasp, as if the air itself was being inhaled into it. The sphere shot forward, not with incredible speed, but with a calm, inexorable certainty. It didn't collide with the concrete pillar. It simply touched it, and the pillar ceased to be. There was no dust, no debris, no shrapnel. A perfect, sphere-shaped chunk of the pillar, 3 feet in diameter, was simply gone. Vanished. Erased from existence. In its place was a lingering cold, a pocket of air that felt ancient and dead. The edges of the hole in the pillar were unnervingly smooth, as if a cosmic ice cream scoop had taken a sample of reality. The gym was plunged into a silence so profound it was deafening. All Might stared, his mouth agape, his blue eyes reflecting a horror he hadn't shown even in the face of All for One. That wasn't a power of destruction. Destruction leaves rubble. That was a power of unmaking. Aizawa's breath hitched. His pragmatic mind, which could analyze and counter thousands of quirks, had no file for this. This wasn't a quirk. This was a violation of the laws of nature. On the monitor, Nisa's furry face was completely still, his usual calculating glint replaced by something that looked chillingly like fear. "My God," he whispered. Deku stared at his own hand, his body trembling violently. The cold whisper returned, tinged with something like approval. "Good. You are beginning to understand. That is the purity. The order. The absence of needless complexity. I didn't mean to," Deku stammered, stumbling backward. "I just used 1%. That wasn't One for All," All Might said, his voice a strained whisper. "My boy, what has that thing done to you?" The dam of Deku's composure finally broke. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, not from pain, but from sheer, soul-deep terror. "I don't know," he cried out. "I need help. The vestiges. I have to talk to the vestiges." It was his only hope. The previous users had always been his guides, his counsel. They would know what to do. They would help him fight this. Closing his eyes, he shut out the horrified stares of his mentors and dove inward, seeking the familiar mental landscape of One for All. He found it, but it was a nightmare. The world within his quirk was no longer the shadowy, ethereal room with its circle of chairs. It was a wasteland. The sky was a roiling storm of that same violet and black energy, shot through with dying green lightning. The ground was cracked and barren, and the chairs were overturned, some shattered, others seeming to decay before his eyes. A constant, mournful wind howled through the space, carrying whispers of despair. He saw them. The vestiges. But they were twisted, warped versions of the heroes he knew. Nana Shimura sat huddled on the ground, her form flickering and translucent. Her vibrant smile was gone, replaced by a mask of utter hopelessness. Tears that seemed made of static rolled down her cheeks. "It's over," she wept as he approached, not even looking at him. "He showed me the end of everything. So much light, all of it extinguished. There's no point in fighting. The worlds are already dead." Her despair was a palpable force, a cold blanket that smothered his own will to fight. Further on, he saw Daigoro Banjo, the fifth user, leaning against a crumbling pillar. His usual energetic, almost cocky posture was gone. He was slumped, his movements sluggish. The black whips that were his quirk drooped from his arms like dead vines. "Just let go, kid," he said, his voice flat and empty. "It's easier. The struggle, it just makes the end hurt more." embraced the silence. It's so peaceful. He was echoing the anti-monitor's seductive nihilism, the temptation of surrender. Then, from the deepest shadows, two figures emerged. The second and third users, always the grimmest of the vestiges, were now almost unrecognizable. Their forms were wreathed in the purple and black energy, their eyes glowing with a cold, malevolent light. He is weak, the second hissed, the voice a discordant chorus. He resists the inevitable. He clings to a flawed concept. The purpose is clear, the third added, its voice like grinding rock. Order must be restored. The cancer of positive matter excised. The catalyst must fulfill his function. Why do you fight your own nature, Ninth? They weren't just corrupted. They were converts. Mouthpieces for the anti-monitor's will, their own grim resolve twisted into an endorsement of cosmic genocide. Deku backed away, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was worse than he could have ever imagined. His sanctuary had become a prison. His guides had become his tormentors. Was all hope lost? No. Not all of it. From the very center of the storm, near the shattered remnants of what was once the first user's chair, a tiny light flickered. It was a fragile, struggling ember of the familiar green, desperately fighting against the encroaching tide of black and purple. It was Yoichi Shigaraki, the first. Deku rushed toward it, wading through the oppressive despair of the landscape. As he got closer, he could see Yoichi's form, faint and ethereal, almost completely consumed by the darkness. The first user was on one knee, his head bowed, his form flickering as if he were about to be snuffed out. He was using every ounce of his will not to attack the darkness, but simply to endure it, to preserve a single, tiny pocket of the original one for all. He looked up as Deku approached, his eyes filled not with despair or malice, but with a profound, agonizing struggle. His voice was barely a whisper, a faint signal amidst a hurricane of static. Fight. The single word was a monumental effort. Ninth. Don't let it take you. It feeds on despair. Your will is the only shield left. Yoichi's form flickered violently, and a wave of black energy lashed out, forcing Deku back. The first user gritted his teeth, his faint light dimming further as he fought to contain the corruption within the quirk's core. Can't hold it for long. It's inside all of us now. Save yourself. The connection broke. Deku was thrown from the mindscape, his eyes snapping open to the cold reality of Gamma Gym. He was still on his knees, gasping for breath, the psychic echoes of the vestige's torment ringing in his ears. He had his answer. There was no help to be found within One for All. There was only a war, and he was the battlefield. Yoichi was fighting, but he was losing. The others had already fallen. He looked up at All Might and Aizawa. The pity and confusion were gone from their faces, replaced by a stark, undisguised terror. They had seen the result of his 1% flick. They had seen him collapse, muttering to himself. They had no context for the internal battle he had just witnessed, but they understood the result. Their student, their rising star, was now wielding a power that could erase reality, and he had no control over it. Deku slowly, shakily, got to his feet. The haunted, ancient weariness he felt in that moment made him seem decades older than his 16 years. The vibrant, hopeful light in his eyes, the light that had inspired so many, was gone. In its place was a hollow, desolate emptiness. You were right, he said, his voice quiet, devoid of all emotion. It's not a quirk. Not anymore. He looked at Aizawa, then at All Might. He saw their fear, and for the first time, he agreed with it. He was afraid of himself. Terrified. I'm a danger, he stated, the words tasting like ash. To the school. To you. To everyone. He took a deep breath, the decision solidifying in his mind with the cold, hard certainty of a tombstone. It was the only heroic choice he had left to make. A sacrifice not of his life, but of his freedom. You have to lock me up, he said, his voice steady now, resolute. Someplace I can't hurt anyone. Someplace where this thing can be contained. Please. You have to do it before I lose control again. Before it makes me do something. All Might started to protest, his heart breaking for his boy. No, young Midoriya, we can find another. There is no other way. Deku snapped, a flash of his old fire returning, fueled by desperation. Did you not see what I just did? That was an accident. What happens when it's on purpose? What happens when the anti-monitor decides it's time for me to start my work? I can't be around people. I can't be a student. I can't be a hero. I'm a bomb waiting to go off. Aizawa placed a hand on All Might's shoulder, silencing him. He looked at Deku, his dark eyes filled with a grim understanding. He saw the logic. He saw the sacrifice, and it broke his heart in its own quiet, pragmatic way. We have a facility, Aizawa said, his voice low. Level Omega containment. Designed by Nizu, built by Cementos and Power Loader after the first Tartarus breakout. It was made to hold someone with a reality warping quirk. We never thought we'd have to use it. Deku just nodded, a wave of numb relief washing over him. It was the right thing to do. The only thing to do. The cell was deep beneath UA, in a sublevel so secret most of the staff didn't know it existed. The walls weren't concrete or steel. They were a strange, milky white material that Aizawa explained was a non-Euclidean polymer designed to be dimensionally inert. It absorbed and nullified almost all forms of energy. It was a cage for reality itself. The heavy door slid open with a low hum. The room inside was Spartan. A bed, a toilet, a small table, all molded from the same inert polymer. There were no sharp edges. No windows, just smooth, white, silent containment. Deku stepped inside, his shoulders slumped. He turned to face his mentors one last time. All Might looked like a ghost, his face a portrait of utter failure and grief. Aizawa's expression was a stoic mask, but his clenched fists betrayed his inner turmoil. Thank you, Deku said softly. The door began to slide shut, the sound a final, heavy note of finality. He watched their faces disappear, watched the last sliver of the outside world vanish, until he was alone. He was alone in the silent, white room. He sat on the edge of the bed, the polymer cool and unyielding beneath him. He was safe. Everyone else was safe from him. He had done it, but as the silence pressed in, the whisper returned, clearer than ever before in the absence of other stimuli. A cage of matter will not hold back the void. This changes nothing. You are only delaying the inevitable. But rest, little key. You will need your strength for the work to come. A single, cold tear traced a path down his cheek. He was locked away, a prisoner in the safest place on earth, but the real monster was locked inside with him. And it was patiently waiting to get out. The silence was the first form of torture. In his dimensionally inert cell, sound did not echo. It simply died. The soft scuff of his feet, the rustle of his uniform, the ragged breaths he took, each was a solitary event, born and extinguished in the same instant. It was a silence that felt heavy, a physical weight pressing in on him from all sides. He had been here for 3 days. Or was it 4? Time, like sound, seemed to lose its meaning in this sterile, white void. Izuku Midoriya sat on the floor, his back against the cool, smooth wall. He was trying to ground himself, to fight the encroaching cold that was perpetually coiled around the core of his quirk. He focused on his memories, the one weapon the anti-monitor couldn't seem to directly touch. He pictured All Might's booming laugh, Uraraka's bright, zero-gravity smile, the scent of his mother's katsudon. These were his anchors, his proof that the world of hope and love was real, and the nihilistic whispers in his mind were the lie. With a trembling finger, he traced the UE logo into the faint condensation his own body heat made on the polymer floor. I am a hero, he mouthed, the words soundless. I protect people. I am a student of UA. Hi. A charming sentiment, the voice whispered, slithering into his thoughts not from an external source, but from within, from the corrupted heart of One for All. It was a cold, clinical intrusion, like a surgeon's scalpel probing his soul. You cling to an identity that is now obsolete. A designation for a function you can no longer perform. You are not a student, you are a tool. And your period of rest is over. Get out of my head, Deku gritted out, the words a harsh rasp in the dead air. He pressed his palms to his temples, as if he could physically squeeze the presence out. I am not in your head, Catalyst. I am in your power. In your very potential. I am as much a part of you now as your ambition. Suddenly, the white walls of his cell began to shimmer. The inert polymer, designed to be immutable, rippled like water. The color bled away, and the wall in front of him dissolved, not into blackness, but into a scene so vivid, so real, he could almost smell the familiar scent of old paper and dust bane. It was his apartment. His mother, Inko, stood with her back to him, dusting a photograph on the mantelpiece. It was a picture of him, grinning in his uniform on the first day of school. She looked thinner, her shoulders slumped with a worry that was a permanent part of her posture now. "Mom," Deku whispered, his voice cracking. He scrambled forward, reaching out, but his fingers met the cold, unyielding surface of the cell wall. The image was a projection, a cruel mirage. "She worries," the anti-monitor's voice stated, devoid of any emotion. "She does not know her son has become the harbinger of the end. She believes you are sick. She prays for your recovery." A futile expenditure of emotional energy. The scene shifted. Now it was the Yue common room, late at night. Achiko Uraraka and Tenya Ida sat on a sofa, a textbook lying forgotten between them. "I'm just worried," Ida-kun, Uraraka said, her voice, though just a part of the vision, echoing perfectly in his memory. "They won't tell us anything. Just that he's in specialized care. Did you see his eyes? It felt like the light had just gone out." Ida pushed his glasses up his nose, his usual confident posture replaced by a troubled stillness. "Midoriya-kun is strong. He has overcome every obstacle placed before him. We must have faith in his resilience, and in the judgment of the faculty." But his words lacked conviction. He was trying to reassure himself as much as her. The vision warped again. A training ground. Bakugo stood alone, staring at the scarred concrete where he and Deku had fought so many times. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, his expression not one of anger, but of a grim, frustrated confusion. He wasn't screaming. He was thinking. And somehow, that was infinitely more terrifying. Finally, the cruelest image of all. All Might, in his skeletal form, stood on the Yue rooftop, looking out over the city he had sworn to protect. He looked old, frail, and utterly defeated. He coughed, a racking, painful sound, and wiped a fleck of blood from his lips. He was staring at the sky, as if searching for a sign, for the symbol of peace he had passed on, not knowing that symbol was now chained and tainted in the darkness beneath his feet. "They all have hope," the anti-monitor's voice was a low thrum of cosmic machinery. "They believe in you. They believe in this world. This flawed, chaotic, positive matter universe. Their hope is an anchor, binding it to existence. It is inefficient." A new image appeared, superimposed over the vision of All Might. It was a swirl of stars, a deep space vista. A single, barren planet, ringed by red dust, floated in the black. "Your resistance is pointless. You have no leverage. You have no choice. But because I require your optimal performance, I will provide you with motivation. Watch." A flicker of black, no bigger than a pinprick, appeared beside the red planet. It was the same energy he had accidentally created in the gym. The sphere of annihilation. It touched the planet's atmosphere. There was no explosion. No grand, fiery spectacle. The planet simply ceased to be. One moment it was there, a testament to billions of years of cosmic formation. The next, there was only empty space, the red dust rings dissipating into nothingness. It was silent. It was clean. It was absolute. Deku fell back, a strangled cry escaping his lips. The visions of his loved ones vanished, and the cell walls solidified back into their sterile white. But the afterimage of that casual, effortless annihilation was burned onto the inside of his eyelids. "What do you want from me?" He screamed into the silence, tears of rage and terror streaming down his face. "I want you to begin your work. There is a universe, close in frequency to this one. Its structural integrity is low. It will be your first. Your test." "No! I won't! I'll kill myself first." "If you do," the voice said, and for the first time, there was a new intonation, a sliver of cold, hard threat. "I will vent my frustration on your world. I will not be swift. I will unmake your mother, as she holds your photograph. I will erase your friends as they call out your name. I will decay your mentor's body, cell by cell, leaving his mind intact to witness his own failure until the very last second. Your compliance will buy their continued existence. Your resistance will sign their agonizing death warrants. The choice is yours, Catalyst. The threat was absolute. It was not a bluff. He had seen the proof. His life was no longer his own to sacrifice. His will was now a hostage, held against the lives of everyone he had ever loved. The choice wasn't a choice at all. It was a sentence. Before he could even form a response, the floor beneath him dissolved. It was not a fall. It was a violent, nauseating pull through everything. His body, his very atoms, felt like they were being stretched into an infinite string, threaded through the eye of a cosmic needle, and then snapped back into place. The sensation lasted an eternity and an instant. Pain flared behind his eyes, a migraine of impossible proportions, and he vomited onto the grimy asphalt, his body convulsing. He was in an alleyway. The air was cool and damp, smelling of rain and exhaust fumes. The rhythmic beeping of his cell was gone, replaced by the distant sounds of a living city, sirens, car horns, the low murmur of a crowd. He looked up, his vision swimming. The sky was overcast, a familiar shade of gray, but the buildings that framed it felt off. The architecture was similar to Musudafu, but simpler, less reinforced, less prepared. He stumbled out of the alley, leaning against a brick wall for support. He was in a bustling city square. People hurried past, their faces illuminated by the glow of massive video screens mounted on the sides of buildings. And on those screens he saw the truth of this place. A news anchor with perfectly coiffed hair spoke with grave intensity. Another spontaneous manifestation reported in the downtown financial district. Authorities are urging citizens to remain calm, but public fear is growing over the quirk phenomenon. Another screen showed a heated debate. A stern-faced politician was shouting, "These meta-abilities are a threat to our way of life. We need regulation. We need control." Deku's blood ran cold. He recognized this. This was his world's past. A world where quirks were new, terrifying, and misunderstood. A world on the brink of the chaos that had necessitated the rise of heroes in the first place. A world full of innocent people who had no idea what was coming. As if on cue, a scream cut through the crowd. A young man, no older than 20, was backed against the storefront, his hands held up in surrender. They were glowing with a brilliant, uncontrollable white light. "Stay back!" he shrieked, his voice cracking with fear. I can't turn it off." The crowd wasn't reacting like they would at home, with a mixture of curiosity and practiced indifference. They were reacting with pure, primal fear. They formed a wide, panic circle around him, some pulling out their phones to record, others shouting insults, calling him a freak, a monster. An excellent example of the inherent chaos of positive matter, the anti-monitor's voice observed calmly in his mind. Disorder. Fear. A system on the verge of collapse. It is merciful to end it. No, Deku whispered. His instincts, the core of who he was, screamed at him. That boy needs a hero. Ignoring the cold dread in his stomach, he pushed through the frightened crowd. "It's okay," he called out, his voice stronger than he expected. "He's just scared. Everyone, just give him some space." He approached the terrified young man, holding his own hands up in a placating gesture. "Hey. It's all right. Just breathe. Look at me. My name is Izuku. What's yours?" The young man's eyes, wide with panic, focused on him. "I don't know what's happening," he stammered, the light from his hands pulsing erratically. "I do," Deku said, his voice gentle. "It's a part of you. It's not a curse. You just need to learn to control it. Try focusing on your breathing. In and out. Feel the energy inside you, but don't fight it, guide it." He was channeling Aizawa, channeling All Might, channeling every teacher he'd ever had. For a fleeting, beautiful moment, he wasn't the catalyst. He was Deku, the hero, and it felt like breathing again after being held underwater. But the anti-monitor would not allow it. The sky above the city square flickered. For a split second, the overcast gray was replaced by a churning, digital static, a tear in the fabric of this reality. The sound of the crowd distorted, their voices dropping into a low, demonic growl before snapping back to normal. A wave of nausea rolled through Deku as he felt the world's structure groan under the strain of his presence. His resistance was acting like a metaphysical poison to this universe. "You are delaying," the voice hissed, laced with an icy impatience. "Every moment you waste playing the hero brings this world closer to a chaotic, agonizing collapse, and it brings your own world closer to my wrath." A new vision flashed behind Deku's eyes, sharp and agonizingly clear. Uraraka, her face contorted in a silent scream as her body was consumed by the same black, annihilating energy he had seen in the gym. He gasped, stumbling back, clutching his head. The young man with the glowing hands looked at him in confusion. "No, no, please," Deku begged, speaking to the entity in his mind. "Find the linchpin," the anti-monitor commanded, its voice leaving no room for argument. "Every reality has a focal point. A person, an object, or a concept that anchors it to the positive matter multiverse. It is the keystone in the arch. You are the hammer. Find it. Strike it. And this world will unravel cleanly," it showed him. A sudden influx of information flooded his mind, a map of the city, a psychic beacon, a glowing thread of energy only he could see, leading away from the square. The linchpin was close. "I can't," Deku whispered, tears welling in his eyes. Another vision. All Might, on his knees, crumbling into gray dust, his last sight the image of Deku's face, twisted in horror. "Stop!" Deku screamed aloud, drawing stares from the crowd. He couldn't take it. The psychological torture was absolute. It was a perfect, diabolical trap. To save his world, he had to destroy this one. To be a hero to his loved ones, he had to become a monster to a billion strangers. He turned and ran. He followed the glowing thread of energy, his legs moving on autopilot. He ran from the crowd, from the boy he was trying to save, from the hero he was trying to be. The city blurred around him, a smear of gray buildings and frightened faces. The psychic pressure from the anti-monitor was immense, a physical weight on his shoulders, forcing him onward. The sky continued to flicker and glitch, a sign that time was running out. The thread led him away from the bustling downtown, towards a quieter, residential area. It led him to a park. A peaceful, green space with a playground, a duck pond, and families enjoying the cool afternoon. The thread, a brilliant gold in his new, horrifying perception, ended at a small boy, no older than 6 or 7, sitting on a park bench. The boy had messy brown hair and was wearing a bright red t-shirt with a clumsy, hand-drawn lightning bolt on it. He was sitting next to a little girl who was crying, her scraped knee a tiny tragedy. "Don't cry," the little boy was saying, his voice earnest and clear. He wasn't touching her, just sitting beside her. But Deku could feel it. A small, subtle field of energy emanating from the boy. It wasn't flashy like glowing hands. It was an aura of pure, undiluted courage. A passive quirk that soothed fear and inspired hope in those around him. The little girl's sobs subsided, and she looked at the boy with wide, trusting eyes. This was him. This was the linchpin. The genesis of this world's heroic age. A child whose simple, innate goodness was the seed from which this universe's salvation would one day grow, and the anti-monitor wanted Deku to snuff it out. A woman, presumably the boy's mother, looked up from her book and smiled. "Leo, that's very kind of you to help." Leo. His name was Leo. Deku stood at the edge of the park, hidden behind a large oak tree, his body shaking uncontrollably. This was a line he could not cross. He would not. He would let the anti-monitor destroy his own world before he murdered a child. "A noble, but foolish sentiment," the voice said, its tone flat. "Then watch." The world of the park vanished, replaced by an image of his own mother, her back to him in their apartment. But this time, a tendril of black, corrosive energy was creeping up the wall behind her, silent and unseen. "I will not be swift. Your defiance will be her agony. Do it now, or she pays the price for your morality." Something inside Deku broke. A dam of resolve that had withstood every villain, every injury, every moment of self-doubt, finally shattered under the impossible, soul-crushing weight of this choice. He could not watch his mother die. He could not be the reason for her suffering. The vibrant colors of the park seemed to drain away, replaced by a dull, hopeless gray. The happy sounds of children playing faded into a low, monotonous hum. His feet felt like lead as he stepped out from behind the tree and began to walk across the grass. Each step was an eternity. He saw the faces of the people in the park. A father pushing his daughter on a swing, an old couple feeding the ducks, teenagers laughing on a blanket. A billion lives, a billion stories, a billion futures. And he was the end of them all. He approached the bench. The mother looked up at him, her smile friendly and unassuming. "Can we help you?" she asked. Deku couldn't speak. His throat was a knot of unshed tears. The boy Leo turned to look at him. His eyes were wide and curious, full of the innocent light that Deku had just been ordered to extinguish. He saw Deku's haggard appearance, the tear tracks on his grimy face, the haunted look in his eyes. But Leo's quirk didn't know despair. It only knew how to be brave. He looked at Deku's muscular build, at the determined, though broken, set of his jaw. He saw a hero. "Are you a hero?" Leo asked, his voice filled with childlike awe. The question was the final, devastating blow. It struck the very core of Izuku Midoriya's being and shattered it into a million pieces. A sob, thick and choked, finally escaped him. He fell to one knee in front of the child, his head bowed. The mother started to look concerned, ready to pull her son away. But Deku was already moving. He raised a trembling hand, the corrupted energy of one for all flickering weakly around it, green, black, and purple. The colors of a dying star. He looked up, meeting the boy's curious gaze. He saw his own reflection in those innocent eyes, a monster wearing the face of a hero. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the two words carrying the weight of a billion souls. He gently placed his hand on the child's shoulder. He didn't push. He didn't channel a blast of power. He simply let go. He opened the floodgates within him, and the cold, nihilistic antimatter energy that the anti-monitor had gifted him flowed out. It was not a violent release. It was silent. Creeping. A wave of absolute nothingness that started from his point of contact with the boy. Leo didn't scream. He didn't feel pain. He simply looked down at Deku's hand on his shoulder with a faint expression of confusion. Then, the color drained from his red t-shirt, turning it white, then translucent. His form began to shimmer, turning into a column of soft, white light. And then, he was gone. The wave of annihilation spread outwards from that point, perfectly silent. The mother's concerned expression froze as she too dissolved into light. The bench, the crying girl, the oak tree, they all unraveled like a tapestry being unstitched thread by thread. The wave washed over the park, erasing the laughing children, the old couple, the teenagers. Sound ceased to exist. Then color. Then form. The city beyond the park followed, the skyscrapers and streets and cars all fading into a uniform, blank whiteness. The sky, the ground, the horizon, all of it dissolved into a single, seamless, empty canvas. Deku was left floating in the center of it all. An endless, silent, white void that stretched into infinity in every direction. There was no up, no down, only the profound, soul-crushing emptiness of a universe that was no longer there. He was alone. But he wasn't. He could feel them. A billion lives, extinguished in an instant. It wasn't a memory. It was a psychic backlash, a ghost echo slamming into his soul. He felt the phantom pain of a trillion last thoughts, the ghost of a billion final heartbeats, the love of a mother for her child, the ambition of a recent graduate, the simple contentment of an old man sleeping in his chair. All of it, all their joys, sorrows, histories, and futures, reduced to a silent, screaming void inside him. The weight was unimaginable. It was the weight of a world. And it was now on his shoulders for eternity. He had saved his mother. He had saved his friends. He had saved All Might. But in doing so, he had become a murderer on a scale that dwarfed every villain in the history of his own world. Shigaraki wanted to destroy a city. All for One wanted to rule a country. He had just deleted a universe. He floated in the silent whiteness, no longer crying, no longer capable of it. The vibrant, hopeful boy named Izuku Midoriya, the one who dreamed of being the world's greatest hero, had died in that park. In his place was something new. Something hollowed out, ancient, and broken. He was a killer of worlds. The transition back was as seamless as it was brutal. One moment, Izuku Midoriya was a solitary ghost floating in the silent, white tomb of a universe he had just murdered. The next, he was sitting on the floor of his cell, the same smooth, inert polymer beneath him, the same dead air pressing in on him. To an outside observer, nothing had changed. Not a single second had passed. The atoms of his body had not aged. The dust motes in the air had not settled. He had been gone for an eternity, and for no time at all. But he was not the same. The boy who had been taken from this cell was a terrified, cornered animal, fighting with every fiber of his being against a monstrous fate. The one who returned was a hollowed-out echo. The vibrant, heroic fire that had defined Izuku Midoriya, the defiant spark that had burned brightly even in the face of despair, had been drowned. Not extinguished. That would have been a mercy. It had been submerged in an ocean of cosmic guilt so vast and so cold that it could never be warmed again. He didn't move. He didn't cry or scream. He simply sat, his back against the wall, his gaze fixed on the blank surface opposite him. But his eyes saw nothing in the room. They were still staring into the endless white void, replaying the silent, clean unraveling of a world. He could see the face of the little boy, Leo, his expression of childlike awe shifting to faint confusion in the final millisecond of his existence. He could feel the psychic ghost of a billion extinguished souls clinging to him, a shroud of silent screams that only he could hear. The coldness that had been an invader, a parasite latched onto his quirk, now felt integrated. It had seeped from his power into his very essence. The anti-monitor's whisper was gone, its immediate purpose fulfilled. There was no need for threats or coercion now. The entity had branded him, not with a mark on his skin, but with an act so monstrous it had irrevocably altered the landscape of his soul. It had proven its point. It had made him its accomplice. He had become a herald of the end. Not through choice, not through corruption, but through the most heroic and selfless impulse he possessed, the desire to protect those he loved. It was the most exquisitely cruel trap imaginable. The low hum of the cell door sliding open barely registered. It was a sound from a different world, a world of life and consequence that no longer felt like his own. He didn't look up as two figures entered. Problem child. Aizawa's voice was low, cautious. He and All Might had been alerted by Nizu that the anomalous energy signature within Midoriya's body had flared violently for a fraction of a second before returning to its previous state. A spike of such magnitude should have leveled the facility, but it had been directed inward or outward to a place they couldn't measure. They had come expecting to find him either unconscious or in the throes of a catastrophic breakdown. They found neither. They found a stillness that was more terrifying than any outburst. Young Midoriya? All Might's voice was frail, a desperate plea for a response. Are you all right? Deku slowly lifted his head. He looked at them, and for a moment, they both felt a jolt of relief. He was lucid. He was there. But then they met his eyes. The change was profound and horrifying. The vibrant, emerald green that had been filled with so much life, so much emotion, was now muted, as if seen through a thick pane of smoked glass. The bright spark of hope was gone, replaced by a weary, ancient emptiness that had no place in the eyes of a 16-year-old boy. It was the look of a soldier who had seen 1,000 years of war, of a god who had watched galaxies die. It was an old man's gaze in a young man's face. He didn't answer their question. Instead, he said, his voice a flat, emotionless monotone, the containment is working. I'm still here. His lack of fight, of his usual desperate need to explain and be understood, was deeply unsettling. He was no longer fighting his confinement. He was embracing it. It was his penance. What happened, my boy? All Might pressed, taking a step closer. We felt a surge. It's over now, Deku interrupted, his voice devoid of inflection. He looked at his mentor, the man who had been his son, his entire world, and for the first time, he felt a flicker of something other than hollow emptiness. It was a cold, distant pity. All Might, the symbol of peace, still believed in absolutes. He believed in good and evil, in victory and defeat. He believed you could save everyone. It was a beautiful, noble, and catastrophically naive worldview. Deku knew better now. He knew that some choices were not between saving one person or another, but between which world to condemn. You still believe you can save everyone, Deku said, the words echoing the very sentiment he was thinking. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, tinged with the profound sadness of a secret he could never share. The words, spoken with such dead finality, struck All Might harder than any physical blow. He heard the echo of the Anti-Monitor's nihilism in his successor's voice, a casual dismissal of the very creed that had defined his life. The last embers of one for all within him, that faint connection to his legacy, seemed to grow colder, sensing the deep, fundamental wrongness that had taken root. Aizawa stepped forward, his expression grim. Midoriya, we need a better answer than that. What was that energy spike? Deku's gaze shifted to him. A test. The test is over. Before either of them could press further, the sound of another person approaching made them turn. It was Katsuki Bakugo. He stood at the open doorway, his usual explosive energy coiled into a tight, simmering ball of tension. He had bullied his way past the security guards, refusing to be kept in the dark any longer. Out of the way, you two, he growled, pushing past his teachers. He stormed into the cell and stood before the seated Deku, his red eyes blazing with a mixture of rage, confusion, and a fear he would never admit to. Get up, you damn nerd, Bakugo spat, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He was trying to provoke a reaction, any reaction. He needed to see the stuttering, crying, determined Deku he knew, the rival who pushed him, the annoying bug who was always at his heels. He needed to shatter this terrifying calm. Deku simply looked up at him, his expression unchanging. What is this crap? Bakugo gestured wildly around the white cell. Hiding away down here like a coward? You beat the big bad, so what's the problem? That freaky purple lightning scared you so much you pissed your pants and decided to quit? He leaned in, his voice dropping to a snarl. I'm not gonna let you. I'm still coming for that #1 spot. You and me, we're not done. So get up and fight me, you useless Deku. It was the perfect provocation. A cocktail of insults, challenges, and shared history designed to ignite Deku's spirit. It did nothing. Deku's gaze remained empty. He looked at Bakugo, at the fierce, burning passion in his eyes, and felt that same distant pity. Kaken was still fighting a war on a single battlefield. Deku was now a veteran of a conflict that spanned dimensions. Their rivalry, their promise, their race to the top, it all felt so small now. So achingly, heartbreakingly insignificant. It doesn't matter, Kaken, Deku said, his voice soft, but carrying the weight of a dead universe. The words were like a splash of ice water in Bakugo's face. He reeled back as if struck. Not you're wrong. Not I'm not useless. Not even a tearful defense. Just dismissal. An acceptance of meaninglessness that was the antithesis of everything Bakugo, and the Deku he knew, stood for. It unnerved him more than any fight, any explosion, ever could. What did you just say? Bakugo whispered, his own rage faltering in the face of this profound apathy. The #1 spot. Being the greatest hero. It doesn't matter, Deku repeated, his voice as hollow as the void he'd left behind. None of it does. Bakugo stared, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. This wasn't Deku. This was a shell. A stranger wearing his rival's face. The frustration and fear inside him finally boiled over, but it didn't come out as a shout. It came out as a desperate, pleading question. What did they do to you down here? Deku finally looked away, breaking eye contact. It wasn't down here. Aizawa decided that was enough. Bakugo out. Now. He placed a firm hand on his student's shoulder and guided him, unresisting for once, out of the cell. All Might followed, casting one last look of utter despair at the boy he had chosen, the boy he now felt he was failing on a level he couldn't comprehend. The door hummed shut, and Deku was alone again. But this time, the silence was different. It was no longer just an absence of sound. It was an absence of hope. And in that perfect vacuum, something new began to stir. He held up his hand. Before, the corrupted energy had been a chaotic, uncontrolled torrent. A disease. Now, it felt different. It felt accessible. The ghost echoes of the billion souls he had erased were a constant, humming presence within him, and their psychic residue had subtly altered the antimatter's nature. It was no longer just a raw, destructive force. It had absorbed echoes of life, of structure, of thought. He focused on the cold energy, not fighting it, but reaching for it with a detached curiosity. He imagined a shape in his mind, a simple sphere, like the one he had created by accident in the gym. Slowly, a small ball of the same perfect, light-devouring blackness materialized in his palm. It didn't flicker or spark. It was stable, solid, humming with a quiet, contained power. He could feel its annihilating properties, the way it tugged at the very fabric of the space around it. He held a miniature black hole in his hand. He closed his fist, and the sphere vanished without a trace. He tried something else. He pictured the opposite corner of his cell. He focused on the concept of being there, not moving there. He drew on the purple, glitchy energy, the aspect of his new power that felt connected to the tearing of reality itself. For a split second, his body dissolved into a shower of violet static, reappearing instantly in the corner he had visualized. The teleportation was flawless, silent, and deeply unsettling. It wasn't a speed quirk. It was a violation of physics. He slid down the wall, his breath catching in his throat. He was becoming more like the anti-monitor. He was learning to use its gifts. The thought should have terrified him, but he was too numb for terror. It was simply a fact. He was a weapon, and he was beginning to understand how he worked, and then he felt something else. A new sense, like a faint, high frequency ringing at the edge of his perception. He closed his eyes and focused on it. It wasn't one sound, but a multitude, a chorus of faint, overlapping vibrations. Each one felt different, some high and frantic, others low and steady, some harmonious, some dissonant. He understood, with a chilling, intuitive certainty, what he was sensing. These were the frequencies of other universes. He was a tuning fork, resonating with the vibrations of the multiverse. He could feel his own world, a strong, familiar, vibrant hum. He could feel others, distant and faint, their songs barely audible. And he could feel a deep, grating, all-consuming silence that seemed to be growing, swallowing the fainter frequencies one by one. The antimatter universe. He was no longer Izuku Midoriya, the boy who analyzed quarks in his notebook. He was becoming something else entirely. A cosmic entity in training. A reluctant god of annihilation. The power to create constructs of pure void, to teleport by tearing holes in space, to sense the music of creation itself. These were the tools of his new trade, and he hated it. He hated every new discovery, every new ability that solidified his role as the anti-monitor's key. The part of him that was still Izuku Midoriya, the small, flickering ember of the hero, curled up in a corner of his soul and wept. But the rest of him, the herald, simply observed. Catalogued. Learned. Meanwhile, in a darkened conference room several floors above, a different kind of horror was dawning. Principal Nisa sat at the head of a long table, his white fur stark against the gloom. The room was a hub of information, screens displaying energy readings, psychological profiles, and encrypted communications from around the globe. Opposite him sat All Might and Aizawa. To their side, a grim-faced Endeavor and a tense, watchful Hawks. They were the core of Japan's hero leadership, convened for a meeting of unimaginable gravity. The initial report from his psychiatrist is inconclusive, Nisa began, his paws steepled before him. He shows all the signs of severe post-traumatic stress disorder, dissociation, and delusional ideation. However, he gestured to a large central screen. It displayed a waveform analysis. One line was a vibrant, chaotic green. The other was a flat, jagged line of black and purple. This is the energy signature of Midoriya's quirk before the Jaku incident, he said, indicating the green line. And this, his claw tapped the other, is its signature now. Dr. Shield's lab in America has confirmed our findings. The second energy form does not conform to any known energy type, quantum or otherwise. It behaves, for lack of a better term, like a negative energy. It doesn't radiate, it absorbs. Its presence causes localized decay in standard model particles. Endeavor grunted, his arms crossed over his massive chest. In English, rat? In English, Endeavor-san, Nisa said, his black eyes glinting. Whatever is happening to young Midoriya is not in his head. The power is real. He brought up a satellite map of the Pacific Ocean. A single point was marked in red. 2 days ago, at the exact moment our sensors detected the first major spike from Midoriya's cell, a global network of astronomical observatories detected a gravimetric and radiological anomaly at this location. A void event. An entire cubic kilometer of ocean water and seabed was, for 1.3 seconds, completely erased from existence. The room was silent. Hawks's golden eyes widened slightly, the implications clicking into place. They'd been happening all over the world, Nisa continued, pulling up more data points. A patch of the Sahara Desert. A section of the Antarctic ice shelf. Small, insignificant, remote locations, all experiencing brief, inexplicable moments of total annihilation. Tiny flickers. Barely noticeable. All perfectly timed with energy fluctuations from Midoriya's cell. He's practicing, Aizawa said, his voice a low rasp. He's learning to control it. So the boy has a dangerous new quirk, Endeavor scoffed, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. We contain him. We find a way to neutralize it. Problem solved. You misunderstand the scale of the problem, Nisa said grimly. And then, a priority alert flashed on his main screen. It was a secure communication from an international hero consortium, marked with the highest possible threat level. He patched it through. The face of an alien appeared on screen. Not a human with a mutant quirk, but a true extraterrestrial, a member of a hero corps that patrolled a different sector of the galaxy. Its face was reptilian, its eyes large and black, and its expression was one of absolute, soul-deep terror. The transmission was weak, flickering, corrupted by static. Repeat, this is a quadrant-wide distress call. Source of the cosmic wave is unknown, but its effects are absolute. Reality is unraveling. We have confirmed the loss of the Xylos and Nar star systems. They're just gone. The alien's voice was frantic, desperate. We managed to get one psychic echo from a telepath on Xylos before it went dark. A final warning, a message. Beware the... The transmission crackled violently. Green and black herald. Another burst of static. The silent end. The alien's eyes widened in horror as a wave of shimmering distortion washed over its own ship in the background. It's here! The transmission cut out. A single line appeared on the screen. Signal lost. The silence in the conference room was absolute. Green and black herald. The silent end. The descriptions were chillingly, unmistakably specific. All Might slumped in his chair, looking as if all the bones had been removed from his body. It's true, he whispered. Everything, he said. The anti-monitor. The multiverse. It's all true. The abstract, insane ramblings of his traumatized successor had just been corroborated by an alien from halfway across the galaxy. The problem wasn't that Izuku Midoriya had a dangerous new quirk. The problem was that Izuku Midoriya had become the single greatest threat to the continued existence of the universe. Hawks was the first to speak, his voice stripped of its usual lazy drawl, now sharp and cold as a razor. So what's the play? We can't keep him here. UA isn't equipped to contain a reality-ending threat. No place on Earth is. There is an unthinkable option on the table, Endeavor said, his voice low and gravelly. He didn't look at All Might. If the boy is the weapon, then we may have to disarm it. Permanently. No! All Might shot to his feet, his skeletal frame trembling with a sudden, fierce energy. We are not talking about this. He is a child. He is a victim. He is my... He choked on the word. My son. We do not kill children. We do not murder one of our own. That is not what heroes do. And what do heroes do when one of their own becomes the vessel for a power that can erase planets? Endeavor countered, his own turquoise eyes blazing. Do we stand by and let him be used to destroy everything, out of sentiment? The needs of the many, All Might. It is the ugliest, most basic rule of our profession. There has to be another way. All Might insisted, his voice cracking with desperation. Then find one, Aizawa cut in, his voice cold and pragmatic, though his eyes betrayed his own agony. Because right now, the most logical course of action is the one Endeavor is suggesting, and if it comes down to a choice between Midoriya and the rest of the world, I know what my duty is. The lines were being drawn. A battle was coming. Not just for the fate of the world, but for the soul of their greatest rising star. A coalition was forming, built on fear and a grim, terrible necessity. They were assembling to fight a cosmic horror, but their target would be the smiling, determined boy they had all sworn to protect. The hero they had raised was about to become the villain they had to hunt, and deep below them, in the silent white cell, the herald sat, feeling the symphony of creation, unknowingly awaiting the arrival of both his friends and his executioners. The silence of space is not truly silent. It is a constant, low hum of cosmic microwave background radiation, the faint, lingering echo of the Big Bang. It is the whisper of creation itself. But a new sound was now sweeping through the void, a discordant note in the universal symphony. It was a wave of absolute, perfect silence, an encroaching null field that did not pass through space but erased it, leaving a trail of pure, conceptual nothingness in its wake. On the bridge of the starship Stratos, the last bastion of the Galactic Hero Corps' Delta Quadrant Division, Commander Xyler watched his reality die. The Xylos in our systems were gone, their light years of existence replaced by a blank spot on the long-range sensors, a patch of no data where stars and planets had burned for eons. The phenomenon was moving faster than light, faster than thought. It was not an invading fleet or a natural disaster. It was a fundamental law of physics being rewritten. Xyler, a being whose crystalline physiology allowed him to perceive tachyonic energy, had managed to capture the final, desperate psychic scream of the Logi telepath on Xylos just before it was unmade. The message had been fragmented, a desperate burst of pure concept forced through the static of a collapsing reality. He had broadcasted it on every channel he could, a final warning to the multiverse, even as the wave of silent annihilation bore down on his own ship. The where? Green and Black Herald, the silent end, the crying boy. The words were a chilling, nonsensical poem of doom. A herald implied a master. Green and black were colors, a simple designation that felt terrifyingly specific. Silent and perfectly described the phenomenon his sensors were failing to analyze. But it was the last part that haunted Xyler in the final moments of his life. The crying boy. It spoke not of cosmic malice, but of cosmic tragedy. The instrument of their destruction was not a monster reveling in its power. It was a child, weeping as it pulled the trigger. The forward view screen, which showed a beautiful, swirling nebula, began to glitch. A corner of the image dissolved into the same flat, featureless white that was consuming the star charts. "It's here," Xyler said, his voice calm. There was no point in panic. There was nowhere to run. He closed his multifaceted eyes, focusing on the psychic echo, amplifying it with the last of his own life force. He pushed it outward, a final, defiant beacon. A warning in a bottle, thrown into an ocean of collapsing dimensions. Someone, somewhere, hear this. Know what is coming. Then, the silence took him, thousands of light years away, on a planet blissfully unaware of the cosmic horrors stirring beyond its atmosphere. The message arrived. It didn't arrive via radio telescope or subspace communication. It manifested as a ghost in the machine. In a high-security server room at the Hero Public Safety Commission headquarters in Tokyo, a technician cried out as lines of alien script and corrupted data scrolled across his monitor before the system crashed. In Island's primary research facility, David Shield watched in baffled confusion as a quantum entanglement experiment suddenly produced a coherent, repeating audio file of a single, distorted alien voice before overloading. In a dusty, occult bookshop in London, a tired old man who dabbled in magics he barely understood felt a sudden, cold dread, as if a billion souls had cried out and then were suddenly silenced. The pieces were scattered across the globe, fragments of a puzzle no one yet knew they were supposed to be solving. But the key to deciphering it all lay deep beneath the pristine grounds of UA High. The conference room was thick with tension. The garbled, terrifying message from the doomed Commander Xyler had shattered any lingering disbelief. The threat was real. The scale was unimaginable. And the epicenter was their student, their charge, Izuku Midoriya. A green and black herald, Hawks repeated, his voice dangerously soft. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his usual carefree demeanor completely gone, replaced by the sharp, analytical focus of a predator. That's not a coincidence. The energy signature Nisa showed us. The colors match. The silent end, it matches the phenomenon that wiped out that patch of ocean. Endeavor's jaw was clenched so tight a muscle pulsed in his cheek. He stared at the blank screen where the alien's terrified face had been. His entire life had been a struggle for power, a climb to the top of a well-defined mountain. He understood fighting villains. He understood strength and strategy. This was something else. This was like trying to punch a hurricane. So the boy is being used, he rumbled, the words tasting like ash. A puppet for this Anti-Monitor. He's a victim, All Might insisted, his voice raw with desperation. He looked around the table, at the grim, calculating faces of his peers. He felt like a lone tree in a rising tide. Can't you see? The final part of the message. The crying boy. That's him. That's my boy. He's not doing this willingly. He's being tortured into it. We have to save him, not condemn him. Save him how, Tashinori? Aizawa's voice cut through the emotional plea with surgical precision. He looked exhausted, the skin under his eyes dark and bruised, but his gaze was clear and steady. We can't reach him. We can't counsel him. We can't use quirks on him without unpredictable results. His cell is a temporary measure at best. The master this herald serves can seemingly pull him out of it at will. He is the most dangerous being in the known universe, and we are holding him in a cage with a door that only opens from the outside for his jailer. Mizu, who had been silently coordinating with a dozen agencies at once on his terminal, finally spoke. His small, furry face was a mask of grave seriousness. The global response is beginning to coalesce. The fragments of the alien message are being pieced together by every major intelligence agency on the planet. The truth is spreading. And with it, panic. He brought up a new screen. It showed encrypted communications from the United States President, the European Union's Hero Council, and the Russian Hero Federation. The language was different, but the message was the same. What is your containment plan for Deku? The threat is global. The response must be unified. They want to take him, Hawks deduced instantly. Move him to an international facility. Or worse, they are proposing what they call the Prometheus Protocol, Nisa said, his voice grim. A joint operation to neutralize the host. They believe that by eliminating the Herald, they might disrupt the Master's plan. They are assembling a team. Led by who? Endeavor demanded. A file appeared on the screen. It was a picture of a woman with short, white hair, a powerfully built physique, and an expression of absolute, indomitable will. She wore a red, white, and blue costume that evoked the American flag. Kathleen Bate. All Might whispered, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Star and Stripe. The strongest woman in the world, Hawks added, a note of grim respect in his voice. Her quirk, New Order, allows her to impose new rules onto reality itself, within certain limits. If anyone has a quirk that could theoretically counter a reality-warping power, it's her, Endeavor grunted. A powerful asset. But she's one person. This is not a fight for a single hero. She will not be alone, Nisa confirmed. He pulled up more files. A roster of the world's most powerful and tactically brilliant heroes. A German hero who could manipulate kinetic energy on a citywide scale. A Brazilian hero who could generate impenetrable force fields. An Egyptian hero who was rumored to be able to manipulate time itself within a localized sphere. The world was not just panicking, it was arming itself. It was assembling an army to point at a single, broken-hearted teenage boy. This is insane, All Might said, shaking his head in disbelief. They'll kill him. A full-scale assault like that, he won't survive. That is the point, All Might, Endeavor said bluntly. And perhaps it is the only one. No! All Might slammed his fist on the table, a sudden surge of his old strength making the metal groan. We are heroes. We find another way. There is always another way. I will not stand by and allow us to become monsters to fight a monster. A heavy silence fell over the room. The ideological chasm between them was vast and deep. On one side stood All Might, the champion of hope, clinging to the belief that the individual could be saved, no matter the cost. On the other stood Endeavor and the world's governments, operating on a grim, utilitarian calculus where one life, even an innocent one, was an acceptable price to pay for the survival of billions. Aizawa and Hawks were caught in the middle, their hearts siding with All Might's plea, but their minds acknowledging the cold, hard logic of Endeavor's position. There may be a third option, Aizawa said finally, breaking the standoff. All eyes turned to him. It is not a good one. It is, in fact, a terrible one. But it is not murder. He looked at Nizu. The cell is a cage. But what if we made it a prison of the mind? We can't reach him with normal counseling, but there are quirks. Mental interference quirks are highly restricted for a reason, Aizawa-kun, Nizu cautioned. The risk of permanent psychological damage is immense. Is it worse than the alternative? Aizawa shot back. We assemble our own team. Not of killers, but of specialists. A telepath to try and break the anti-monitor's psychic hold. A quirk specialist who can analyze and perhaps isolate the foreign energy within one for all. And a support system. People he trusts. People who can reach the crying boy inside the Herald. It was a desperate gambit, a plan built on a sliver of hope. Instead of an army to destroy him, they would assemble a team of surgeons to try and save him. Endeavor looked skeptical. While you are attempting this psychic surgery, what's to stop his master from pulling him out again to erase another solar system? We create a shield, Hawks chimed in, catching on to Aizawa's line of thinking. The international team wants to use power to attack him. We use it to defend him. We gather heroes with energy manipulation, reality warping, and spatial locking quirks. We create a layered, defensive bubble around UA, a fortress not to keep him in, but to keep the anti-monitor out. We try to sever the connection. It was a race. Two plans, born from the same terrifying truth, were now in motion. The world's plan, the Prometheus Protocol, was a spear aimed at Deku's heart. UA's plan, a desperate, last-ditch rescue mission, was a shield to protect him. Whichever team assembled and acted first would likely determine the fate of Izuku Midoriya. All Might seized on the hope Aizawa had offered, his eyes regaining a fraction of their old light. Yes. This is the way. We save him. We show them we don't have to sacrifice our ideals. He turned to Endeavor. Help us, Endeavor. Your power, your influence. We need it. Endeavor was silent for a long moment, his turquoise eyes flickering between the hopeful face of his old rival and the cold, logical threat assessment on the screen. He had spent his life trying to surpass All Might, driven by a dark and bitter ambition. But in the crucible of the war against Shigaraki, something had shifted. He had seen true heroism, not as a ranking, but as a selfless act of sacrifice. He had seen it in his own son, and he had seen it in Midoriya. The world will not wait for your experiment to succeed, All Might, he said, his voice a low rumble. Star and Stripe is already on her way. She will not be reasoned with. Her sense of justice is as absolute as yours, but it is aimed at the greater good. He stood up, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the table. I will not join your rescue squad. But, he paused at the door. I will buy you what time I can. I will join the international coalition. I will argue for containment over elimination. I will be the voice of reason inside their war room. But if your plan fails, and if the choice comes down to the boy or our world, I will do what needs to be done. He left without another word. It was not the alliance All Might had hoped for, but it was more than he had expected. Endeavor was not their enemy. He was an unwilling arbiter, standing between the spear and the shield. With a new, desperate purpose, the resistance began to assemble. Nizu's fingers flew across his keyboard, sending out encrypted summonses. Aizawa began compiling a list of potential candidates for his psychic surgery team, scouring databases for obscure but powerful mental quirk heroes. Hawks took to the air, his crimson feathers detaching to act as messengers and spies, gathering intel on the Prometheus Protocol's movements. All Might had a different, more personal task. If they were going to reach the crying boy, they needed more than just powerful quirks. They needed his friends. The atmosphere in the Class 1A dorms was heavy and somber. They knew something was terribly wrong with Midoriya. They had all seen the haunted emptiness in his eyes after the battle, heard the rumors of his specialized care in a deep sublevel facility. But they were being kept in the dark, fed platitudes about recovery and trauma, and it was breeding fear and suspicion. All Might entered the common room, and the hushed conversations immediately ceased. Every eye turned to him. His presence, usually a source of comfort and inspiration, now felt heavy with unspoken dread. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He gathered them together and told them a carefully curated version of the truth. He didn't speak of the multiverse or the anti-monitor. Their minds weren't ready for such cosmic horrors. But he told them that during the fight with Shigaraki, Midoriya's quirk had been infected by a piece of Shigaraki's own will, a nihilistic, destructive energy that was now poisoning him from the inside. He explained that this was the source of his apathy, his isolation, and the dangerous new aspects of his power. He believes he is a monster, All Might said, his voice thick with emotion. He has locked himself away because he is terrified of hurting you. Of hurting anyone. The boy you know, the friend who would run through a wall for any one of you, is still in there, but he is trapped. He is fighting a war inside his own soul, and right now, he is losing. The students listened, their expressions shifting from confusion to dawning horror and a fierce, protective anger. So what are we supposed to do? Kirishima asked, his fists clenched. Just sit here while he's suffering? No, All Might said. We are going to fight for him. But this is not a battle of fists. It is a battle of hearts. He looked directly at Uraraka, Ida, and Bakugo. Uraraka Xiaozhou, he began, his voice softening. Your kindness, your unwavering belief in his goodness, it is a light that can pierce any darkness. He needs to be reminded of the hero he inspired you to be. Uraraka's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, her expression resolute. She would not let her friend drown in despair. Ida Shounen, he continued, turning to the class president. Your steadfastness, your belief in order and friendship, the way you pulled him back from his own reckless path during his vigilante phase. He needs that anchor now more than ever. He needs to be reminded of the structure of heroism, of friendship, that he is not alone. Ida pushed his glasses up, his jaw set. I understand. I will not fail him. Finally, All Might turned to Bakugo, who had been listening with a tense, coiled silence, his gaze fixed on the floor. And young Bakugo. All Might's voice was gentle. He needs you most of all. Bakugo looked up, his red eyes filled with a storm of conflicting emotions. What the hell is that supposed to mean? He hates me. No, he doesn't, All Might corrected. He looks up to you. He always has. You are his benchmark, his rival, the other side of his coin. Your fire, your refusal to ever give up, your absolute belief in victory. That is the very thing this darkness inside him is trying to extinguish. He needs to be reminded of the fight, not of your anger, but of your strength. He needs his Kaken. For a long moment, Bakugo was silent. The weight of his entire complicated, violent, and deeply intertwined history with Deku settled on his shoulders. The childhood bullying, the sports festival declaration, the secret of One for All, the fight at Ground Beta, their shared victory against Nine. He was more than a rival. He was a witness. He knew Izuku Midoriya better than anyone. And the hollow shell he had seen in that cell was a desecration of everything he knew. TCH, Bakugo grunted, turning away to hide the uncharacteristic emotion in his eyes. Tell me when and where. I'll blast that sad sack crap right out of him. It was his version of I'm in. The resistance had its foundation. A shield of heroes was being forged to protect his body. A team of specialists was being assembled to heal his mind, and a core of his dearest friends was preparing to salvage his soul. It was a desperate, beautiful, fragile plan, and it was already running out of time. Thousands of miles away, a squadron of advanced stealth jets carrying the strongest woman on Earth screamed across the ocean, their destination, Japan. The spear was already in flight. The race had begun.